we could have gone live.
All right. We always run a minute or two over anyway. So
good morning.
Yeah, and it's like we gotta go. It's time to show up.
Oh, if these guys only knew what it was like behind the Showtime button.
Good grief.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
hey, good morning, all.
Oh, yes, it's crazy this morning. Anyway, we have no guests this morning. I was hoping to have one. Allie sent me a link to a channel that I tried to get hold of the girl that has the channel, but she didn't have an email, so I had to leave a comment in her video, and hopefully she'll contact me back. And we'll get her on sometime. And then I think, didn't Evan say he was willing to come back on?
Yeah, he wants to get back on. So one of these Saturdays soon, he's going to jump back on.
Well, tell him we can do it next week if he wants.
Yeah. No, I told him to just let me know. And he's trying to clear up a Saturday and get on. But yeah, he's doing some really cool stuff.
Sparky, it is when my mouth is open. To answer your question.
Which is most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. I try not to talk all the time, but
we were having a good conversation about tools.
Yeah.
yeah. We were doing the tool thing. Anyway, welcome this morning. Glad to have you guys here. And Steve, why don't you run it down for us?
No, we got quite a crew in this morning. Good morning, everybody. We got Rob T-Man. Good morning. Gus Hadley, the lunatic from Arnold. Well, that's pretty cool. We got Thomas, the post-war train guy. Schuylkill River Valley John. Good morning, John. Lynn McCurdy. We got Mark Pruitt. Good morning, Mark. John Banichecki. Good morning. Yes, Multimedia. Good morning. We got Allison. How are you, Allison? And Gail's in chat. John Dawson, good morning. Did I say Rob T-Man? I think I did. Mike's Deep Run Railroad, good morning. Sparky, can't forget Sparky. Good morning. How are you doing this morning? I think, and that's it. Is there any more?
It's funny.
And Path Valley. I think your name is Larry. Good morning, Larry.
Oh, Mr. Anderson showed up.
Oh, our buddy Steve. Oh my goodness.
I think it's funny. I think Rob T-Man is the one guy that always gets mentioned, and then everybody comes back. At least one person each week will come back. Did we get Rob?
Yeah.
It just seems that way. It seems like he's always the one we're saying, "Hey, did we get him?"
Where's Jerry this morning? Did I miss?
I don't know. He did not. I don't think. Let me check. He did send a note. He's going rail fanning today, so he won't be with us.
I'm sure he will provide lots of video content then.
Oh, I'm sure, like he did last week. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I was up in his neck of the woods this week for work, so I was on Amtrak and up in the Philadelphia area. It was nice up that way. He ought to have a good day out and about, I think, before the weather turns.
Yeah, I would imagine East Coast rail fanning is a little easier than it is here. Although we've got, BNSF comes through here. On a fairly regular basis, but where I'm at, I barely hear them sometimes because the tracks are probably 5 miles north of us. So only if they're blowing the horns and I happen to be outside can I hear them.
Yeah,
but used to be where I did live before. You heard them all the time, and there's a pretty good yard on the west side of town, but that's about 13 miles from here. So.
There's a lot of good stuff on the CSX line that runs, between the Richmond, and south, and then up north through New York. When I was waiting at the train station this week, heading up towards Philly, I was kind of out on the platform waiting for the passenger train to come, and a work train came by, and the work train was like hundreds of cars, and it was flat car after flat car after flat car carrying maintenance of way equipment south. I got video of it. It's not the best. I'll put it on my channel one of these first days as an add-on to one of my videos. But it was really kind of cool to see that huge train with all the work equipment on the flat cars, for track, just heading south.
Yeah.
But flat cars are probably my favorite car just because you can put almost anything on them. and you got something else to look at besides the car itself.
Actually, that would be an interesting train to model.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
here in
why I
Tulsa,
took the video.
here in Tulsa, they've got a train track, and I believe it's part of the Union Pacific that must junction here in Tulsa. Because every time I see them out on this side of town, it's a Union Pacific engine that's switching out some of the industries that they hit, the few that still do that kind of stuff out here on the side of town. But the track actually goes up when they put the highway from downtown out to this part of town, which is southeast part of town. They went right along the railroad tracks on each side for quite a ways. And I saw some maintenance away equipment one day going downtown that were out there, and of course they're changing out ties and redoing the ballast and that kind of stuff. And I'd have got video if I'd have seen it ahead of time, but I was by myself and trying to work a camera and drive. No, I'm not going to try and do that. But, it was kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, it's made for an interesting train, and Steve and like Dennis too saying, modeling that kind of stuff would be pretty cool.
Well,
because if you like maintenance away equipment, that you can put on flat cars, you could make just a really cool looking train that's unusual.
Yeah. As it is at his club, members run a maintenance away train, and he has several videos.
Yeah. Oh, I would imagine if he's running it, yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've got some maintenance away cars that I bought off eBay. They're HO, so I don't know how much of it I'll use because the standard gauge on mine is very limited. But I bought them because they look kind of cool. They're all painted gray. I've got rotary plows for both the standard gauge and the narrow gauge. So yeah, I plan on having maintenance away equipment, especially in the narrow gauge. I'll have a whole string of those, but I want to eventually get a pile driver and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen the video of the pile driver, I think it was on Toyman's channel a couple of years ago, where the Cumberson Toltec Railroad rebuilt their steam powered pull driver, and they were actually using it, and he got video of them using it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So if you want to see that, you can go back and look at that. But it's pretty
anybody
cool.
Ribbon rail train?
Say again?
I wonder if anybody's ever made a ribbon rail train, a welded rail train.
Oh, and modeling?
I've seen that on a YouTube video. It's been long ago that I think it was a club, made a ribbon rail train.
I wonder how they got because you would think if you put that much rail on flat cars, it would to a board, a stiff.
Yeah, I would imagine that if you did that, you would have to have broad curves, and then you probably would have to judiciously hide cuts in the rail so that it would have a little flexibility to get around. But
you're going to have to describe what a ribbon rail train is to me, because I'm not familiar with it.
Well, it's string of flat cars with racks on it and rollers, and the welded rail is just fed onto this train in levels, so that they would take the train and stop, and they'd attach two of the rails to a D9 dozer or something, and the train would pull ahead, would just drag these two pieces of welded rail off, and they'd fall.
How long were the lengths of rail, give or take?
Oh gosh, they were long ways. I don't know, probably quarter mile, half mile, maybe more.
Definitely a modern operation.
Oh yeah. You wouldn't see it on the railroad.
Lynn sent me something, a video or something. Lynn, we'll have to show it next week. I'll have to set it up so I can show it. But he sent a video of, I think he said a ribbon rail or a maintenance away train that he had. So I'll try and remember to get that set up for next week.
Rob T-Man says a quarter mile of rail. So
That's that's not short.
No, no, but
What,
then
what would that be? 8 feet in HO, give or take.
Yeah.
then they
You'd
thermite
have, you'd
weld.
have true welded rail. You'd have to get 36-inch sections and solder them together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to have a layout like the Colorado Railroad Museum, Model Railroad Museum, something like that, to be able to model that. They've got some pretty good sized curves on it, but you'd have to have some space for sure. Otherwise, that's all you're going to model is that, right? that ribbon rail train.
Are they replacing the rail that's already there?
So,
Or are they putting it in front of the train and then driving forward on top of it?
well, it depends. They would be either replacing rail or going from stick rail to ribbon rail. It all depends. But no, they would just drag the train out underneath two pieces of rail. They just anchor two pieces of rail off the train, to a dozer, so they don't move, and then they would pull the train forward and pull
See,
that.
that's what I'm trying to envision. If you're pulling it forward, you'd have to already have rail laid. So is it only a process to replace rail, or did they also use the process for new line?
Oh, I guess you could drag it
I'm
off.
not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how you can do it for new line.
Yeah.
Lay it
there's
in
some
front of the train would
interesting-
be kind of tough.
There's some interesting videos on YouTube that are not American railroads. In fact, Chinese, you can say what you want about China. There are some interesting videos that show how they do the track lane. And it's like what you're talking about, Dennis. They got essentially a ribbon rail train, and then the forward equipment is what brings the ribbon rail off. And then they're laying the track on concrete ties, and the equipment's adjusting it, and then they're pulling over brand new track as they're laying it.
As they're laying
So it's
it?
really a pretty cool process, and I'm
Yeah,
assuming
I'll have
it's
to watch
probably done here as well. But I've seen on again, the Northeast Corridor, ribbon rail land beside, like what Steve said, stick track, where just that they're going to be putting it in for replacement, and where they've been adding new concrete ties on the main lines and different things. Ribbon rail is what's going in for the most part.
Well, it's much safer.
Well, here's the Union Pacific, when they took back in the early 80s, when they absorbed the Western Pacific, it was amazing. Everything on the WP was stick rail in the yards, and a lot of it on the main line. But you knew when the UP was getting ready to take over the WP, they were replacing yard tracks with welded rail. It was crazy that they would do that with the yard. I mean, in Stockton, where I spent a lot of time working, our yard was crap. I mean, it's all bolted rail that you go over it and things are wobbling like this. You go through and you do a transfer cut over to the UP yard, and it looks like mainline track in the yard, because they had all welded rail in the yard. And they spent a lot of time and money doing that.
Yeah, Thomas brings up a thing here. Are they doing thermite welding when they put that ribbon rail together? I'm assuming they would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen them do that. That's kind of cool to watch.
Yeah.
So Steve, how do they accommodate for rail expansion during hot parts, hot weather with ribbon welded rail?
They would preheat it or treat it, with they would set up torches along the side, a lot of times to stretch it. But you would get thermal kinks in it from time to time. It happens.
Well, Jack says all the rail being replaced is their tier 1 high grade rail, which I don't know what that means, but do you know what that means, Steve?
No.
It may be something that they've come out with since you've been out.
Maybe Jack will tell us.
Yes.
I know yesterday when I was coming back from Philly on Amtrak, they made announcements that they were having to run like 20 miles per hour less than normal speed due to heat advisories. So just I don't know if there's restrictions when temperatures get to a certain heat level that the trains have to run a little slower just to be more careful.
I get that might be something new. I don't recall ever doing that.
And maybe just with passenger service. I don't know, but one of the conductors was talking yesterday on the train that they were running slower because they had to due to heat.
Yeah.
Well, we did that. I know with earthquakes in the Central Valley, California. Anytime we had some sort of seismic event, the dispatcher would stop all the trains, and then you had to proceed at restricted speed, for until you died on the law. Because with the welded rail, if it doesn't break or separate, you still have a signal indicator. So if you've got a seismic shift,
you could have a kink somewhere in your line could cause a serious problem and not know it.
Cruising along speed and go.
Allie sent this link she said it was exactly what you were describing, Steve, with the laying of the rail. I can't copy and paste it off of here, but if I could, I'd
So I got a question that kind of ties this together with model railroading. What do you guys use, or do you use anything when you lay your model rail to allow for expansion? Is there an accepted gap size between the rails when you put it together, or just out of curiosity?
I'm talking to us on the panel.
Yeah. Anyone in chat? Anyone?
I don't intentionally leave any. I solder almost all my joints together, obviously, except for joints for turnouts and that sort of thing that need to have gaps on them. But I've soldered all mine together, and I've not had any problem. But then again, mine's in a controlled environment, so it's not going to move a lot. If I was in your shape, Dennis, I would have to have some gaps in them.
And Jack asked that question. The Tier 1 high grade rail is just thicker rail.
Thicker rail.
What
about you, Bill? Do you take that into consideration?
Being that I have a layout in a garage, I have thought about it. But what I don't do is I do the opposite of Claude. I don't solder anything. So none of my rails are soldered together. I've just made sure that when I was building it, I put in a crap load of feeders just to be on the safe side, to make sure that I've got it. And most of my track joiners are fed because I've made my own little connectors underneath. But, even on my end scale, without doing that, I had one spot in one of the recent videos over a little bridge where my two sections come together where it humped because I'd had expansion. And it was in a long enough stretch where everything was tight together, and it wasn't glued in that spot over that little bridge. So it went up. So I ended up having to cut out, about an 1/8 inch section of track on the end scale, and then, put rail joiners there, again, not soldered. Gives me a little bit of wiggle room if I do get a little expansion and contraction.
Well, I did kind of what Mark suggested. And so on all of my loop curves, where you're going 180 degrees basically around the loop, I find it almost impossible to lay track without soldering, just because of the nature of trying to join two pieces of track together. And it might be different with Pico or a different brand of track, but the micro engineering code 70 and for sure the code 55, you're talking about little bitty pieces of plastic holding the rail to the plastic rail ties. So you really need to have that strength built in so that you don't end up with a strange kink at your rail joiner. So all of my rail is soldered around the loops, but I try to build in just a little bit of expansion joint on all the straightaway pieces of track. But I still found that I had issues as a result of not having everything glued down well. So I think maybe there's because that's kind of what I'm curious about. Does the steel itself, the nickel silver, does it actually expand and contract with the weather And if so, by how much, and is it predictable? That's just one of those things that my mind is curious about.
I
So,
think
so
I think almost anything
yeah,
will do
everything
that.
expands and contracts based upon heat. Heck, even we expand and contract based upon air temperature.
So will your
It's
house.
really, yeah, it's really, and I don't know right off the top of my head, but I remember seeing it long, long ago. You know, the rail will expand, but what usually expands most on our layouts is dimensional lumber. So if we get moisture content, heat, and contract, that's what tends to expand and contract. And that tends to be what causes our rail problems more so than the rail itself doing expansion and contraction.
Yeah.
Well, see, all of my spline is glued solid, obviously, and then I haven't connected any of it to the risers.
Yeah.
So it free floats on top of the risers, and I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea.
I would think it's a good idea. You know, your risers, you know, the expansion and contraction is not significant. Even if you had it anchored, you know, you might get, you know, a small fraction of an inch of vertical movement the way you've got it set up. But your splines, that hardboard, that's not going to expand or contract.
That's kind of what I thought.
At least anything that's going to cause you problems or even be perceptible because it's going to be so minute. You know, the way you've got it built, you should have pretty much bulletproof track.
Well, I'm not going to say that. I had to go in and adjust 4 different times, I think. The last time I did it, I re-glued everything, which I know, you know, it was my fault when I did it the first time. I didn't weigh the track down appropriately when I originally glued. So there were places where the glue, how it adhered to the cork just was sloppy. That's just the best way I could say it. So I had to go back in with more glue everywhere and then make sure I had positive pressure on top of the track. Since I've done that, I haven't had any movement that's caused me any problems. So,
Yeah. And everything expands and contracts with temperature and moisture because wood will dry out and shrink or get wet and expand. And then temperature, of course, do the same thing. But every material does it at a different rate. So metal doesn't expand and contract near like wood does, or paper. I mean, look at all the kits that you buy, and they'll say, okay, the paper could have expanded or contracted. So if it doesn't match
definitely contracted if it was a Campbell's kit that was made 30 years ago.
Well, you know, I've found that most of them are pretty close.
Yeah, I agree.
And almost all of mine are older kits. You know, some of the stuff when they were still coming out to test in California. It's amazing to me that they are. Now, whether or not they've shrunk and then expanded again, I don't know. But I've found those have been pretty close. But they tell you to measure from the middle of a dimensional piece and work from the center and go out. Yeah. Which to me, I just put it together. I read the instructions, I see what they want to do, and I rarely use their templates because it's too hard to use the template and also use the directions on the Campbell's kits anyway. There's very few places I need a template for them.
I make copies of all of the templates and never use the paper that the kit supplies.
Yeah.
That way I can have the directions and I've got everything pristine. And if I want to build it again, I can build it again because I've made copies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've saved some of mine and some of them I've thrown away because I'm like, I don't want to build that one anymore. but yeah, Campbell's makes good kits, but some of their stuff was a little funky. But that's why I don't stay with the plan necessarily. And there's stuff that I want to add and stuff I want to take off or change. And so I'm not glued in stone to build that. So if it's a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, no big deal.
And by the time you build a wood kit, you know, in your own home or shop, it's acclimated to what the weather conditions tend to be in your area because I don't think anybody buys a kit and that very same day will sit down and, start to build it. Tends to sit on shelves for, a week, 2, 10 years, whatever, then we get to it. By then it's acclimated and
got some
the
that's
major
definitely at
trade
least
well
3
is
years
done.
old on my shelf.
Yeah, I got stuff that's probably like Claude said, 30, 40, 50 years old that still hasn't seen the light of day that I'll get out one of these days.
Well, and that's not a bad thing because they do the very same thing mainly with flooring. You get oak flooring or pine flooring or even the laminate stuff that they've got now. They'll tell you to bring it into your home and let it sit for at least 3 or 4 days before you ever try to lay it. Otherwise, it's gonna shrink or contract and give you problems there. And I've seen some big gaps in some wood flooring from that very problem. So yeah, it goes with anything that you're doing. Material's gonna do that with temperature and moisture or humidity. Let's just say humidity and temperature is going to be the biggest factors. But anyway, yeah, what were we talking about?
A little bit of everything.
Oh, Mark said Campbell's is closing down.
What?
Oh,
I wonder why. He's actually the guy that owns that now. His name's Tom, and he lives just north of Steve. And their factory is there in
Central Point.
Not Medford. What's the other Central
Point.
Central Point, yeah, which is right by Medford. But yeah, the guy that bought it from the original architect of that company. The other thing I've noticed that there's, I'm trying to remember the name of them, Timberline kits. If you've got a Timberline kit, you can match it right up to a Campbell's kit. I think they stole their plan. I don't know if they stole them or if they bought them in the interim between the 2 owners or whatnot, but they're almost identical.
So they closing down or selling? Because that's what I heard.
He said closing down.
Microengineering was closing down as well, but I was told that microengineering actually changed ownership. So they're moving their plant from where it is now to the city that the guy bought it from, which is one of the reasons why you can't find some things in microengineering at the moment.
Well, yeah.
Because there's been a
So
delay.
I don't know. That's the first I've heard of it. So, although I don't know that there's anything else that I need from Campbell's right now. I think I've got all the kits I need, but.
Well, I want that brewery you're building. I think that will go somewhere on my layout well, years from now. But
They've just have interesting kits, the buildings themselves. And I don't know if he took those from actual drawings or if he drew those himself, the original owner of the company. But he's got a slew of kits. I mean, they make a bunch of different stuff, but most of it is, back in the 1880s through maybe the 30s or 40s. They've got very, very little modern stuff.
Which is perfect as far as I'm concerned.
Well, for me too. I mean, there's most of now today, a lot of it's a lot more modern or would look a lot more modern. But if you're talking about back in the 60s or 70s, you could have a lot of those old wood buildings on the side of a railroad that either were being used or dilapidated.
I mean, depending on what it is, I mean, if any little town that you drive through out here, you can still see those buildings still standing, some of them even being used as legit things. Most of them aren't, but...
Yeah. I remember Brenda asking me one time, we drove through a little town and there's a building right by the road, but it was like at a 45-degree angle to the road. And she goes, why'd they build it like that? I said, well, it was probably an old freight building on the railroad that came through here at one time. And of course the line's long gone, but the building's still there.
Mm-hmm. There's a really large station, and I don't believe it's sitting anywhere now where rail would have been. Just 23 miles south of me. I think it got converted into a home, possibly. But it's a large station, and it's pretty cool.
Very sparky.
Sparky. That sounds like something Anderson would have said. You guys, you and Anderson need to get together. The building would implode, I'm sure. Bernard said something about micro is moving. Sounds like they have a positive future in that little town.
Hope so.
Are they moving within the town that it's in now? Or are they changing locations?
Well,
I mean, it's
my
changing
recollection, and I don't know that he elaborated, but I could probably find the email.
Yeah, I'm missing. Steve Anderson came up here. Microons are still in the family, but they're moving it close to where the kid actually lives. They were on What's Neat this week. Oh, okay. Cool.
Good.
So here's what Jack Harris told me. He said, because I asked him if he knew when they were going to start the HON3, when it was going to become available. He says, I have no idea. The owner let things kind of go, but the new owners are gung-ho and trying their best to get things back to normal. They are moving operations from St. Louis to about 2 hours to their hometown. They've been in the process of building a new building, and I believe getting closer to finishing. They are also upgrading some of the equipment. They are working on the ladder track system, which has been where most of the back orders are placed, and they're not sure when they're going to get back to HON3. So that's,
well, just
I assume that Jack, has spoken with them personally and kind of knows what's going on because he's a dealer. So,
Hey, we need
got the wrong one.
to ask.
Good morning, Mom. Here, this is the one I wanted to put up there. Lynn says it's been closed down, completely closed down. Huh.
It is closed down?
I just ordered some of the plastic brick, just a sheet of it that I needed to, because it was not in one of the kits that I bought off eBay. They'd used that, I guess, and sold the kit without that in it. But I bought it from Tom just 6 months ago, something like that, 8 months ago.
A lot can happen in.
Well, sure it can, but yeah. I mean, he didn't say anything like, or put a note in the box like, if you want anything else, better get it quick. It wasn't anything like that.
I guess I need to look for that brewery.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff on eBay, and that's where I bought all of the kits. Now, I bought pieces because that was the nice thing. They would sell, if you bought it secondhand and were missing something, you could order those specific pieces, and I've done that for a kit or two. In fact, when he messed up on the delivery address, the first time I did that, I wrote him back on 3 or 4 weeks later and asked him about when it would be here. And he said, oh, I shipped it out the next day. It should have been there. I said, well, I never got it. So he sent it. He got my address again. He sent it again. He sent me a small kit as a sorry we screwed up kind of thing. So it was really great to work with. I hate to see that they're closing down. Yeah. The kits are really nice. But they are.
But I'm definitely craftsman kits. For a while. If you look at the fine scale miniatures kits, I don't know when they stopped producing those, in the 80s maybe. I'm not sure, but you can still find most of those kits.
Yeah, I've got I've got the small Coling trestle, the small one. There was 2 of them that they made, and I've got the smaller of the 2, the shorter of the 2, I guess.
Yeah, I think I've got 3 maybe that I could build, which I don't think I'm gonna. I plan on scratch building my engine house for frying pan based on what the fine scale miniatures kit is. I just haven't decided. Proportionally, it looks a little too tall for the locomotives. So the only thing I may do is lower it by 3 to 5 feet. I just haven't decided yet.
What scale is it?
It's HO scale, but it's
made for standard.
Designed for standard gauge.
Yeah. And
the standard gauge because you're talking about 60-inch drivers, or versus the smaller drivers on a narrow gauge engine. So they're just, that extra height wasn't needed for the building. Maybe they put it in there anyway. I don't know. I just think it would proportionally look better with the locomotives if it was about 3 feet shorter, maybe.
Well, the Campbell water towers, they've got in the plans for the Campbell water tires, they've got both. And you just leave off that bottom part if you're doing the narrow gauge to get it down low enough. But yeah, there's a big difference in narrow gauge engines and standard gauge engines.
Yeah.
So who dropped in? Oh, Jason dropped in. Good to see you, Jason. I'm sure we've seen some others come in. Mom and son came in too. Who else has dropped in that we missed? I can't see.
Well, I was going to say hi to everybody, but you and Dennis never stopped talking long.
That's true.
You guys need to leave at least a break before you go back and forth so that we can talk too.
Okay, Steve, what do you want to say?
Steve.
Huh?
Go, Steve.
I was just need to leave time for you, Dennis, do your little question on your turntable.
Yeah, we'll need to
do that. That's true. Yeah, why don't you go to that? Right,
we're gonna do that now.
Go do that now.
Yeah.
Because the other thing I'll do is forget.
Let's see. I need to.
It's just that time of life.
Settings. I want to go back cam. All right.
This is always the fun part, trying to figure out where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Well, see, Anderson says I need a live mute button, but I can't do that. I'm not a moderator.
So here's the progress on the turntable, and I'm fairly satisfied with it, but kind of the problem that I'm looking at now is kind of twofold. One is that it ended up, I don't know if you can see that, but it ended up being quite a bit higher than the level of the yard there, which I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. But the other thing, I'm curious, what would, because I don't have it glued on yet, what would you guys use to fix this onto the metal? Because this right now, this is pretty delicate. And that was probably the hardest part of the kit, and the thing that I liked the least was getting the rail solidly onto the wooden ties. And so I'm curious, what should I use to put the wooden ties onto the metal bridge where I don't have to worry about it ever coming off, and to add a little bit of strength?
I would use E6000.
E6000, is that like a super glue?
No, it's like Walther's Goo or Shoe Goo. I think it's been marketed under several different names. It sets fairly quickly. It stays a little bit flexible, but it does.
It's not going to turn brittle over time?
No, I don't think it will.
Okay.
And you could put it on a real thin coat on the bridge, on the metal part of the bridge, and then set your wood on top of it. And, within a couple hours, you wouldn't be able to pull it off there without tearing the bridge up, probably.
Okay. Now,
and it wouldn't take much to glue it down. You wouldn't have to have a big blob of it.
And then the next obvious question would be, if I were to build this again, is E6000 what you would have used to put the rails onto the wooden ties as well?
You could. And after it dries, if it squeezes out from the sides of it, I take needle tweezers and pull it loose, all the over, the whatever squeezes out from under it. I take needle pliers and peel it off, because it will come off. I mean, you can pull it off, but it's.
Yeah, you could probably cut it with a hobby knife and
yeah, I don't even have to do that usually. You can usually pull it. Now, it may take you a couple, 3 attempts, because the stuff is pretty elastic. So I mean, but if you put it on there thin enough, you probably wouldn't have that problem. I think on mine, I used plyo bond.
See, here's what I did, and of course, there's going to be a video on this eventually because I've filmed pretty much all of it or taken pictures as I went. What I discovered was what I should have done is I should have, I guess, did a better job of making sure that all the ties were the same height, because that's what I found when I went to glue it. Regardless of what I used to glue, there were just ties that were not going to adhere well to the rails because of a height difference from one to the other. And I'm not sure, if I were to do it again, exactly how I would approach that, but trying to get all of those ties to fit onto the rails, evenly was a source of frustration. I'm just gonna, because a lot of them were popping off because there literally you would had to have stacked the glue on top of the glue to get them to fit because there was just that much difference in some of the wood ties.
Yeah, I think, Dennis, what you could have done, because I know on the outside edges of that bridge, you probably have some other timbers there, maybe with the nut and bolts through them or something like that. I would have put the ties on there maybe on your base part of your bridge. Even if you had to temporarily glue underneath it with some basswood or something to hold it all, and then sand it flat before you put your side detail on there. And actually sand it flat.
Well, I mean,
put your
it's
rail
not
on
really,
there,
you can't
then
really
put your
call it side detail. Those run the length of the actual bridge.
Yes.
They're all the same size timbers. But I see what you're saying. I think if I were to do, because the plans called for using tape to hold it down, I think if I were to do it again, I would have glued every one of those down and then tried to sand them maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on that particular kit I'm not familiar with, but I'm just trying to go by what you've got there and what you're telling me the problem was. But, when I was hand laying track, I didn't even sand a lot of the ties, and some of them weren't even either, but I kind of wanted that. As long as when I checked it, tested stuff, it ran over it okay. I kind of wanted that uneven.
Yeah.
I wanted that wiggle in it, when it went over.
If the ties are already secured to something, that's not that big of a deal. But my thing is I had to lift the whole thing off so that I can move it and put it on there. And the first time I lifted, there's like 10 or 12 ties, just there was no glue on them, and I had to go back in. It was just one of those things. It was like, really? This is way harder than it should be. But I did end up, going back in, and I literally stacked some plyo bond on top of itself. I hate plyo bond. I hate the stuff. I despise it. That's why I'm curious, why I'm wanting for, and I haven't looked at chat because I can't see it, but did anybody else give any other suggestions besides the E6000?
Plyo bond was what Jason said. That's what he's using on his turnouts, which is what I use on my turnouts. But I'm not crazy about plyo bond. I've had some places where it worked really well, where it stuck really well, and in some of the turnouts that you pick them up off the deal, and by the time you go to install them, the ties are coming off.
Well, see, and I don't concern myself with attaching anything to the turnouts. I just slide them underneath. That's what I went
to, mainly because of the cost of the ties that they sell for those.
Right, I agree. That's in my cost analysis of Fast Tracks. If you add in the cost of the quick sticks, I think they call them, or I forget what they call them, but if you add that in to everything else, you're not a lot ahead of buying a pre-made turnout.
Yeah.
So this way, you can buy a bag of, turnout ties for a lot less than, and that's why I did it the way I did. It's a lot more time consuming, but that's why I did it that way. I don't have to worry about attaching anything to the rails other than the PCB ties, which is solder, and I don't have to mess with plyo bond because I hate the stuff. Did I mention that I hate plyo bond?
Well, the trick in
What's your
that
real
case
thoughts
is,
on that, Dennis?
well, the trick in that case for the glue on that is you need something that's going to adhere well to the metal, which I'm assuming is just white metal.
Right. I've
And
got a
then the
good
wood.
cross hatch on all of it. You probably can't see it.
Yeah,
I've got
but
a really good
but then
cross
also
hatch.
the wood, and there's probably some other glues that maybe weld bond might work. Weld bond's a good glue, but it's more like a white glue. I'm not sure how well it would stick to the metal part.
If it were me, and I've not built a turntable, but I've done wood on metal with some of the stuff that I've done, I would use Rapid Fuse. And
Say it
that's
again.
I would use a product called Rapid Fuse. It's something that I get at Home Depot. It's a type of cyanoacrylic glue, but I found that it sticks well to just about anything. And since you've already roughed up your metal surface, it would give it something to bite into on that. And I guarantee you it would bite into your ties absolutely no problem. And once you get it down and you get it positioned, it's not going anywhere.
Okay. Well, thanks,
one of
guys.
Yeah, and if you did consider Rapid Fuse, you experimented a little bit before you do it, but Rapid Fuse, you can put like a thin bead, which will take it longer to cure, which is typical of a lot of the super glues. If you do super thin and you put it on, it would almost adhere immediately. But if you put a slight bead and it gives you a little time to finesse it into position, then you weight it down, and then it's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah, that's going to be one of those things that I will be a little concerned about. There's some trepidation involved in getting that thing on there centered both, to the length of the bridge and the width of the bridge. So that's why I want to make sure that I'm using the right stuff, which I don't know. I guess if I use the wrong stuff and it came off, that would be one thing. Because I could actually build the bridge again. I think that took me the better part of 2 days. I could build it again because I just have to buy the lumber to do it. Actually, I think I might already have it. I think I could make it better than I did the first time now that I've got some experience, but oh well.
But yeah, it looks great. I mean, it looks really nice. And the height problem shouldn't be a problem to fix.
Yeah. The only other thing that I've done since last weekend, I have mocked up the winch house, the boiler winch, hoist house, no
Hoist
winches.
house, yeah.
Winches are over there in Dirty Shame Saloon. But I mocked that up, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this. Of course, this is junk track because that's all I've got left. I'm going to buy some Pico track. I'm stubborn. I'm very stubborn when it comes to what I want versus, what I'm going to get. But it is what it is.
Oh, well, like I say, it's looking great. Oh, yeah, you can show us that.
This
Nice.
this was my birthday present. My wife got me from last weekend, and that's something I picked up. I don't know, a month or so ago. Because I'd like if I could find another one exactly like that. I'm going to have one here and one here above the workbench. So
There you go.
but finding a matching one so far has been pretty difficult.
Yeah, I would imagine. Not a lot of that stuff around. There's so many guys that collect it. But yeah. Okay, Bill, your turn.
All right, I got a little bit done, even though I was traveling this week. So I'll show you a couple of detail things I put in. Let's see here. Oops. Okay. So if we can see it down at this little water feature, I don't know. Can you see the ducks?
Yes, sir. Look
I
like the
painted
ones
those.
that were in my pool.
So I painted up and I made some mallards for this little water feature. A couple of drakes and then a couple of hens just to kind of add into that. That was fun. Then I added in some power poles coming into this camp or the service area. So this service area is, again, late 40s, early 50s, but they've got some power coming in. This is a Woodland Scenics pre-strung power poles. So really pretty cool. I've got transformers on order from a company in Canada that made hydrocal castings, like 6 of them for about $5. So I got a transformer here so I can run down a drop to that building. Got it running over here. I've got to put in guy wire over here, which came with the kit. And then I've got it terminating over here near the water tank. And I'll have a couple of transformers here. Then I'm going to add another pole just to the side of the engine house so that I can have it run over here because the engine house comes off and I'm going to leave it so, it's movable. But then the other wires are going to go down to the pumps that I got that are supplying water, both to the upright water pipe and then the pump that feeds the water tank. So it's something that I haven't really seen anybody model, but you got to get water somehow. It's got to come from someplace. So these are 3D printed kits that I got off of eBay, and they're pretty cool. 2 different pieces per assembly, the pump and then the piping. So I'm going to paint those up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a concrete pad right here. And this is where my construction workers are going to be working. I've got a bag of scaled red bricks so that they're going to be building a pump house over this equipment. Like this is going to be an old weathered one. This is going to be a newer one feeding in the newer water tank. Then painted up a couple of crows or blackbirds at the same time I was doing the ducks. They're watching the guy do some work up on the top there. So I did that. And close your eyes, Dennis. I'm going to go around to the other side. Try not to go too quick.
Oh, those light poles, then, Bill. I found a guy on eBay that I don't know if they're resin cast or 3D printed, but they're insulators, and he's got like several different styles of the glass insulators. Of course, they're plastic, but I bought some from him that I'm going to put on my telegraph poles when I get around.
Oh, those look cool.
Yeah.
So over here, here's like those bricks I bought. I got them off of eBay. So it's like 300 little red bricks. So I will probably pour a little pad and I will actually start to build up like some walls. I won't go too far, but just enough to give the appearance. And then the rest of these will be stacked there. So on my travels this week, I also stopped at 3 different hobby shops up in the New Jersey area, including Yankee Dabbler. And I got this from Yankee Dabbler. So twin drum hoisting engine. This is a nice resin and metal kit. I'm going to build this at some point. And this is going to be...
Hey, Bill, where did you say that? You got that again?
I got this at Yankee Dabbler.
What is who makes it?
This is a Crow River Products resin and metal kit.
Let me guess, they only make things in O scale?
I have no idea. They really didn't have much for like O scale kits as such. This was just sitting on a shelf on top of some Lionel stuff. And I asked them how much they wanted for it because the kit itself was like suggested 68. I got it for far less than 68, and I got some other stuff, and it only came up to like $64 total for everything. So I don't know. I didn't see anything like this in HO at Yankee Dabbler, but I would imagine Crow River Products makes stuff like that.
I'm going to search right now.
because it's really pretty cool. So I'm going to make that into a flat car load that I can run on the O scale. So this goes back to our earlier conversation about flat car loads. This will look pretty cool on there. I'll probably have to keep the stack off of it and just have that as a separate load. And then I'll be able to chain and block it in. So it'll look pretty cool on that. Then we'll go over here to the cabin real quick. I'll just show you a couple of the things that I've added. So just a couple of things up here. I added in some watermelons over here in this tall grass. They're making shine. So I figure, hey, they're going to make some watermelon shine. And then I got in just a little hand pump, which just for, decorations, which I don't know how well they're going to get water, but they must have got some water there because they're, on the edge of a cliff. So there must be some cracks in the ground that they're getting their water from. But so that's kind of what I did. I bought a whole bunch of stuff on my trip this week, including about, I think it was 12 Shinohara Code 70 HO scale switches from a hobby shop in New Jersey called Sattlers. So I'm getting materials around for the next layout build over on the HO scale. And I know what I'm going to build over on that. There's going to be one major industry. And I found that when I was up in New Jersey near where I was, there is a city or a place called Burlington, New Jersey, that had a foundry in it. And it was near where I went. I worked for Amazon. I was going to a building up there, and right next door to an Amazon distribution center was this old foundry site. Took a bunch of pictures that I could from the road. I've already looked it up on like Sanborn fire insurance maps. Lots of medium-sized buildings and lots of track work. So something like that is what I'm going to do on my next 4x8, because again, I still want switching. I want it to be sort of on the edge of a city, which this area is. So I already know kind of what I'm going to do. So it should be kind of fun once I get to that 3 months, 6 months down the road. So I've been busy.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of was what I did for the whole first year, basically. Once I decided to build something, was start collecting stuff, and now I've got way more than I'll ever be able to use.
I looked up Crow River Products. Crow River Products does have HO, and they've got that same hoisting engine, because I need a hoisting engine for my winch house. I mean,
there you go.
My hoist house, $65 though. So
Dennis, there's another company, and I can't think of who it is, but I believe it's still available that has something very, very similar to that, because I've got one of them.
Yeah, because I'm gonna that kit is the Wild West Models kit. It has removable roof. I would like to super detail the inside. So
well, when we get done, remind me when we sign off to go look at that, and I'll find out what the brand is on it for you.
Well, this goes back to an earlier thing that you said, Dennis. We were talking about Craftsman kits and why, stuff that's hasn't been made in 20, 30, 40 years is still available. It's because people like us, modelers, will buy these things intending someday to build them, but a lot of them, they're so complicated. People are hesitant to do that. They'll do some of the easier stuff and they sit, and then all of a sudden it goes on, display or eBay or, other ways of selling it. And then we buy it. And then the stuff we don't build, somebody else is going to buy 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
I started with
something that was
available. Way too complicated for me.
but it's one of those things that people should try. Get a simple type wood kit. Get a simple freight car kit that's an old one made out of wood. I think a lot of people would be surprised that it's actually fun. It's actually not that hard. And you just get some of that gratification of doing it yourself.
I was going to say, when you get done with it, you're overly satisfied with yourself. Even if it doesn't come out great, it's still something you built with your hands. And for me, that's huge. That's why I'm still in this. That's why I used to like building the airplanes more than flying them, because I like putting the stuff together. To me, that was more gratification than playing with it.
It's the same with me. You know, I was always hesitant to build anything that was like super complicated because I had never tried it. You know, I did the shake the box kits or, you know, some of the, you know, quickie building kits. But to sit down and actually do it, if you read and you plan a little bit, it's not that hard. It takes time, but
If
it
the
is so much
instructions
fun
and the
to
plans
build it.
are clear, there's nothing difficult about it at all.
No.
In my experience with the Craftsman kits, the only thing that makes them hard is the translation of what the author of the instructions put into the English language.
Yeah.
And getting that, if they're clear and concise, it's easy to build. But when there's like, what is he trying to say? That's the only difficult thing about it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I wish they would have put a picture in for this step. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing with a Craftsman kit is just take your time. Don't be in a hurry. It's not a plastic kit that you slap together. You know, you remember those plastic kits that you snap together, had all the little tabs and the holes, and you could just snap. You got used to doing that. You don't want to do that with a Craftsman
and
kit.
another
Take
thing
your
I'll
time
say
and
about the
come out nice.
Craftsman kits is if you go ahead and build up some stock, you know, of wood and or the sheet wooding, you know, that you might use in one of those kits. If you've got some of that, you can make a mistake because, well, I've still got some of this material. I can start over, you know, because I've got something to replace what I screwed up. And so some of the worry about screwing it up is there's not that much anxiety anymore because I've got 2x10 material out the wazoo right now. I can replace a 2x10 really easy if I need to.
Yeah. Well, we're over time again this weekend. Well, good to see everybody, and I hope you guys have a good week and a good weekend. And as usual, Bill and Dennis and Steve, thanks for helping out. And we'll get you that mute button, Steve.
I'm going to.
Steve,
I'm telling you, making the moderator.
Need to get one of the little air horns. So a little air horn, when you want to speak, you just blow that.
Perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
Good
Yeah, a
idea.
little can air horn. That'll get our attention. All righty. Hope you guys have a good week. We'll see you later.
Have a good
Take
weekend.
care, everybody.
Take care.